Thanks, Robert. We appreciate the introduction. It's great to be with you today. My name's Courtney, and this is Travis. And I just kind of wanted to get a show of hands. Who is familiar with the hashtag? You know, is everything about hashtag, how it used? Who is not so familiar with hashtags? Okay.
Half and half.
About half and half, okay. Has anyone seen them in Instagram, social media? The origins of a hashtag, where did the origin of a hashtag come from? Because back in the day, we used to use it as something else on a telephone. The pound sign, right? Well, hashtags actually originate, according to Wikipedia. In 2009, Twitter used it as a way of categorizing topics, threads, and anything that someone had mentioned or talked that wanted to be put into a category. And so it was easier than writing it out using other words, so the pound sign became the new hashtag. So today we're going to be talking about using hashtag and scaffolding in online discussions. Travis is going to share more of the research behind it, and then I'm going to show you a classroom application of it, and then we're going to have you guys work through some developing of your own hashtags. But to get us going, we're going to show a little video, and this will illustrate the overuse and preponderance of hashtags today. So.
Hey, Justin, what's up?
Not much, Jimmy.
Oh, of course, it's not working.
Hashtag John, so you.
It will be working. Hashtag rise and grind. Hashtag is it Friday yet?
Hey, check it out. I brought you some cookies. Hashtag homemade, hashtag oatmeal raisin, hashtag show me the cookie.
Sweet. Hashtag don't mind if I don't. Pretty good. Hashtag getting my cookie on. Hashtag I'm the real cookie monster. Hashtag no.
Delicious, right? Hashtag I did it all for the cookie. Hashtag LOL.
Hashtag classic. By the way, did you catch last week's episode of Duck Dynasty? Hashtag quack quack.
Nah, lately I've mostly been watching Netflix. Hashtag Orange is the New Black.
Oh, nice. I've been watching a lot of Barney the Dinosaur. Hashtag purple is the new black. Hashtag I love you, you love me, we're a happy family. Hashtag I'm 38. Hashtag dinosaurs. Hashtag how do they go extinct? Hashtag meteor. Hashtag ice age. Hashtag speaking of ice age, I just watched Ice Age on demand the other day. Hashtag funny. Hashtag Ray Romano. Hashtag Deborah. Hey, by the way, Halloween's only like a month away.
I know.
I mean, do you know where you're going to be at? Hashtag life decisions. Hashtag sexy ghost.
I think I'm gonna go as a Ninja Turtle. Hashtag gotta be Raphael. Hashtag Leonardo sucks. Hashtag the turtle, not the Italian Renaissance painter. Hashtag Mona Lisa. Hashtag is she smiling? Hashtag speaking of smiling, I just saw my dentist. Hashtag bling. Hashtag dental care. Hashtag cavity free. Hashtag that's how we do. Hashtag we go hard. Hashtag and we can't stop.
Hashtag we won't stop.
Hashtag we run this.
Hashtag true players for life.
Hashtag is it worth it or let me work it.
Hashtag put my thing down, flip it, then reverse it.
Hashtag Hashtag
Hey, guys.
Yeah, Quest?
what's up?
Hashtag shut the up.
Expletive there at the end, but it's become inundating with hashtags and the overuse of them. And so there at the end when Quest comes in, he's like, enough already. People are speaking with hashtags. But today we're going to talk about an educational purpose of using hashtags and scaffolding through online discussion forums.
So in the literature on online discussions, the first thing that stands out are the inadequacies of online discussions, why they don't work well. So the first one that we really focused on was not engaging students in higher order thinking. That's a glaring inadequacy and something that comes up time after time in the literature. The second is not allowing the co-construction of knowledge and reflection for students. Again, a lot of times what happens is we'll post a question or a prompt on a reading, and we end up having every student answer the exact same question in the post, which doesn't really allow for a lot of interaction or co-construction. And then third, bearing pertinent information in the discussion posts. So in that specific article, they talk about the fact that and we see this in Canvas as well, when we make new posts, the newest post ends up being at the top. And so students end up seeing that newest post rather than perhaps some of the posts that are the higher quality posts. So those are some of the things we had in mind as we were looking at the use of digital power-ups in online discussions. So as we looked at these improvements, we intentionally planned to use what we call the architecture of engagement. And actually, that comes from Riggs and Linder in 2016, an architecture of engagement. That really talks or speaks to autonomy support. And we'll get into this as well, but it's also the Fisher and Frey gradual release of responsibility model, where you allow students, you help students through the process to begin, and then you gradually hand it off to them. And then the second one is improving the skills of the moderator through training. So I had to really help Courtney learn how to facilitate online. I'm just kidding.
You did.
So again, on that point of architecture of engagement, this comes from Rudensky. He calls it assisted freedom of choice. So the idea is that we're allowing students to have choice, but we're guiding them in those decisions. We're helping focus where we want them to go, right? So we have 3 or 4 options for them. They can choose 2 or 3 of those. So it is choice, but we're guiding that choice. The next is providing a rationale, helping the students understand why this matters. And that is really important when it comes to self-determination theory and looking at autonomy for students, providing that rationale. And then secondly, also allowing some personalization. That comes out in the literature as well. So not only are we providing a rationale, but we're also going to make this personally, something personally relevant for the students. Yeah, let's hand these out real fast. I only made 30 copies, and I think we might be a little bit short. However, I do have a digital copy of the handout on the ETE website. So if you go into the schedule for the ETE conference, I have a link to our handout and then also to our slides if you want to access them there. Kelly brought up Bloom's taxonomy in her keynote today. And so we actually use Bloom's quite a bit as we developed the digital power-ups. But this is looking at Bloom's in a slightly different way. So you have both the cognitive process and the knowledge dimension. Right? So not only are we looking at Bloom's as stacking on each other from remember up to create, but you also look at it from another dimension, going from factual, conceptual, procedural, and then metacognitive. And so this particular model comes out of the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching at Iowa State. And each of those blocks give you an example of what one of those Bloom's verbs might look like and what an objective using that verb could look like for a class. So this again is to kind of give you an idea of what we're doing. And this will come in handy as we get into our activity at the end of the session. I think that's you, Court.
So we're going to talk now about the application of how we utilize this in a classroom, in an online classroom. And Travis talked about that, utilizing Bloom's taxonomy. But in a course that I teach, I use a textbook. This Gustafson here is one of the key textbooks that I have. It's an instructional strategies for diverse learners. And it's for our administrative supervisory certificate program master students in our program that are going through with their teachers that are getting their principal license. And so this course is to help them as a future instructional leader motivate and help their teachers teach every student, so reach all students. And so in this textbook we use, Gustafson came up with this idea of power-ups. And you can see over here, these are the different power-ups. And he adapted these from Bloom's taxonomy, and he used these in a way, essentially as a hashtag, so that they could categorize levels of responses at the different Bloom's taxonomy levels. And so he framed it as a choice and voice and had been identified as a strategy for student courses and activities. So let me show you what I did in this course. So this is a master's level course, and there's something unique in this course anyway, is we provide choice. We give the students options to how they engage with the content. They can choose one of four different modalities as they go through the course, in how they receive the material. So they can visual, oral, which is through audio, read, write, they can read it as a transcript or as an article. And then kinesthetic is more project-based learning. So that's kind of the course in very brief. But where we utilized it is we always wanted to have a classroom interaction activity. We called it a CIA. And when I say we, both Travis and I have both actually taught this course. And so this discussion, every week the students would engage with each other in an online discussion forum. And so as Travis described a lot of those issues that we were seeing with the quality of discussions, we wanted to do something different. And so you can see here's the kind of the prompt that would initiate each of those CIAs every week. And of course they were reading Renegade Leadership at the same time, so here was applying things that they were reading in the textbook. But you can see their initial post was include 2 to 3 power-ups. So if we go back, you can see they were using these power-ups in their discussion forum. But so they would initially post their own comment, and then they would have to reply also using 1 to 2 power-ups. So what are these power-ups? Oh, before we get there, there's the power-ups. So these are the power-ups that we had written, and this was just another tab that they could click on. So they had the prompt, the instruction there in the discussion forum, and then they could click over and see what the power-ups were. And so remember, list or restate something you just read, an opinion, use the hashtag remember, or analyze. Examine a quote you read, compare it to different texts, explain why you think they're related, hashtag analyze, or connect. They could connect it outside, connect it to something else, and then they would use the hashtag connect. Another thing we incorporated too was this option of liking posts. And has anyone seen this in Canvas, this option? So this was great. Travis and the wizards over in City made this available in the Canvas, is that as more and more students liked a certain post, it climbed to the top. So what it allowed for is those higher quality comments were the first comments that people were reading. And so we said, oh, the person with the most likes, we'd actually give, 1 to 2 extra credit points. But we said be very stingy with giving out these likes. Don't just like you do on your Instagram or on your Facebook post. Read through the quality comments. And what we saw is that the level of posts by these students got better and better and better. Almost professional grade quality discussions at some time. So that's how we encouraged the quality, but also incorporated the hashtags. So this was an example of our first discussion, the CIA in the chapter 2, where they had to post about building professional learning communities in a school and using this analogy from one of our other textbooks of culture.
So as Courtney described, those were some of the ways that we looked at the inadequacies and tried to solve them. So to kind of circle back, one was not engaging students in higher order thinking. So what we did there is we had the students use 2 to 3 of the power-ups as they created their responses in the discussion forum. Second, not allowing co-construction of knowledge and reflection. We also had the students using the power-ups in the comments to their peers. This really did prompt co-construction and allowed the students to interact and engage a lot more than maybe they have in the past in that course. And then third, bearing pertinent discussion posts. This was using the likes. So this is a feature you can use in any of your discussions in Canvas. It's actually 2 separate things. One is allowing the likes, and the second is sorting by likes. And so as Courtney said, the students were actually curating every discussion forum, making those higher quality posts move to the top. So instead of them just seeing the newest post, they were actually seeing the better or the higher quality posts. So results, what did we do? Oh, question.
I'm having a hard time visualizing how to use a power-up. Do you have a specific example of like a power-up, what it would look like in practice?
In our slide deck here, but I'd be happy to share that with you. Basically what they will do is they look at the prompt. So for example, this would be the prompt for their week. After they have done the reading they would then write out a paragraph, about 2 to 3 sentences, for each of the power-ups that they were using. So they're just really responding to that prompt, and then they put that hashtag at the end of that paragraph for whichever power-up they were using. So if they were using the remember, they would have a hashtag remember at the end of that paragraph. If they were doing the analyze, they would have about a paragraph and then hashtag analyze. In some cases, on the ones where they did create, they would actually make a video and then do a hashtag create as part of their post. Does that kind of help? Okay.
Does the Canvas Analytics, can it track which hashtags they're using in these discussion posts?
I wish it did. I wish it could track it.
The question was, does Learning Analytics track this use of power-ups?
So at this point, it does not, because it's just used within the body of the text in their discussion post. But what we would do is, if students were wanting to search other posts for that same hashtag, they would do just something like the Control F and search the hashtag, and so they could search through that discussion post that way. I wish I could track it that way, but we don't have that yet. Question over here.
And I love what you're doing right there. My question is how long does it take for the learning curve for the students to really become comfortable utilizing this? I have a very limited 6 in-person initiative, and so I need to hit the ground running. How do you prepare this?
So the question is, what's the learning curve for the students? How long does it take for them to kind of catch on to this? I would say by the second week, they were much more familiar with it. The very first week is we use it as a way to kind of introduce each other, get to know each other, and I have them use it that first week to kind of familiarize themselves a little bit with it. So by the second week, once we're really diving into content, they're already familiar with how to use it.
And we would also provide a model of it. And so in that first get-to-know-you discussion forum where everyone would kind of introduce themselves, we would model that and have a post of ourselves of what it looked like with those hashtags, making those connections. And then we would also reply with hashtags as well.
So it's just a way to categorize their understanding of those connections, those what you call power-ups, with the way they're responding to the prompt.
Yeah, exactly. So they have the choice of, 7? They have 7 options. They use 2 or 3. So it's providing choice for them, but it is a way for them to identify which ones they're using. It's a way for us to easily identify which prompts they're using.
It's also a way, when they understand Bloom's taxonomy, at what level they're responding. So rather than just remembering something from the text or remembering that's something they heard, they know at what level they're responding. Whereas as we got throughout the semester, we can see more create, more evaluate, more connecting. And that's that higher level thinking that we want them to get to. And so while also modeling it, they're also self-processing of how they're doing in regard to their online discussion posts.
And I think, one more thing along those lines. Another thing that came out from the student comments at the end of the semester was that by using the power-ups in the discussion, it actually changed the way that they approached the content, because they knew they couldn't just regurgitate some information.
Oh, I totally agree. That's a great point. Good statement.
Stop it.
That's what we get in online discussion forums. That's what we get. We get that same response. Oh, I totally agree. I don't even know what I just read, but I totally agree with what they said.
Behind you, Rose.
For the use of the hashtag versus just the word create, is it just an attention getter? Or?
The hashtag, I think, shows people are trained now with social media to look for a hashtag when it shows up. And often we had students that would actually bold the word. And those that didn't bold the word learned to bold the word so that other people would notice it, so it would stand out. And I think we're becoming much more ingrained with hashtags that we notice them. And so people, even in scanning through responses, they'll look at that hashtag before even reading the post.
So it's an identifier that this is the term of Bloom's taxonomy, that this is how you usually find it.
Right. Exactly. It becomes that identifier. Rose?
Do you change the points in your rubric based on their higher level thinking?
Oh,
More points,
no.
or just these have to be
We didn't, but that is something that we've discussed maybe in the future doing. Yeah. Changing the points. If they're doing the lower level ones, it would be worth fewer points, whereas if they're hitting the higher level ones, they'd be worth more. We've discussed that, but for this first round, we didn't do that.
You mentioned modeling it that first week, but did you also critique, saying, yeah, you used this hashtag of evaluate, but this really fits under analyze or something like that to help them understand when they were using it properly and not using it properly?
Yeah. So the question is, did we critique or kind of give guidance to students if they were using them improperly or not using the correct hashtag? Absolutely. And I would usually do that in a private message to the student. So rather than posting that in the discussion forum, I would send a message and say, hey, I really liked your post. It looks like though you're addressing this instead. Just make sure, change that in the future. Pay attention to that.
And these were all graded, so we were using SpeedGrader that we could go in and provide that critique. And then we could also help them make connections like, oh, I noticed you mentioned this. Why don't you use hashtag connect there or hashtag create there? So yeah, we would provide, in that first week we almost went overboard because we wanted to teach and model what we expected for the rest of the semester.
Mm-hmm.
Up here.
I was just wondering, as you start noticing, did you see like I don't want to say I don't want to say lower level, but the students that weren't participating as much, did you see a gigantic jump over the course of the semester? Because your higher level students are just going to love this and eat it up like, just go crazy. But the folks that are kind of mid-range, did you notice a giant jump from them?
So the question is, students who maybe are a little lower performing than the rest of the class, did we see a jump in the way that they participated? I don't know if, I would probably answer that with yes, we did see a jump.
I would say yes too. I think it's like the rising tide. When everything's elevated, everybody comes up. And so we were getting students that were creating YouTube channels with their posts. One student made 32 different videos that are phenomenal, great quality. And that just elevated everybody's expectation where everyone would notice the one-liner single hashtag by the end.
And in fact, in some cases, classmates were calling out other classmates, hey, you need to step up the quality of that.
Positive peer pressure. No negative peer pressure, but positive peer pressure.
So in the comments from students at the end, in the anonymous comments, we actually did have several say, I felt an obligation to my peers to really engage in the discussion with quality posts. So to answer your question, basically I would say yes.
Do you tell them how many comments they have to give, or they have to respond to so many students?
Yes. So I do require them to they actually only have to respond to one other post, but we found out throughout the semester that they ended up responding to a lot more than that. That's, again, going back to that co-construction of knowledge. They began engaging in those CIAs.
And that is something where you can track in Learning Analytics the number of comments and how long the comments were. We can do word counts. And we have seen that the number of comments of people responding to others has increased, as well as the number of words that they're using within the comments.
Do you limit the number of likes another student can do?
So we tell them they can do one like per discussion post. By the number that ended up showing up, there were usually one or two. They're usually like one or two. But the guidance was to give one like per discussion forum.
So just one student?
Correct. Yep. They were supposed to like the one that they thought was the highest quality post. So we're running out of time quickly here.
Yeah,
I wanted to share some of these comments from the students. So the question that was posed to them is how did the power-ups impact the way that they approached the discussions, and then also how they engaged in the course content. So one student said they add focus and intent. Power-ups help eliminate most cheap content poor responses.
That's from a student.
That is from a student. Another student said they've helped me feel more modern in the work. Sometimes education can feel tired and stodgy, but this helps keep them cutting edge. Another, in some ways, the power-ups help me to engage more specifically with the content. So rather than just relying on personal experience or things like that, they actually had to engage very specifically with the content. And then another student finally here said, they allow me to make connections that are important to me and relevant to me, which is fantastic. That's what we were trying to do. So now it goes to you. On that first page of the handout,
if you have one,
or on another piece of paper, if you don't have a handout.
If you don't have one, on your hand,
I want you to think about your own course and your own content and create 3 of your own digital power-ups. So I've provided examples on the handout of what we used, and I'll put them up here on the board as well, if you can see. It's kind of hard to see. Those are some examples to work from. You can also look on the back of the page at those Bloom's verbs on the back of your handout to kind of get some ideas. Come up with 3 power-ups for your own course content.
we were about 10 short. So. That students got into this, they actually wanted to start creating their own hashtags. And just for the instructional purposes, we kind of limited that. We didn't want to open up that can because it could derail a lot of it. So students get into this and they want to create their own hashtags. And so there's the possibility of even allowing your class to come up with a hashtag set that you will use for that course.
Could you guys talk about, I'm kind of out of order here because I know you wanted us to share soon, but I'm interested in your grading and how you end up grading these. So whether it's after you have a share, I'm interested in hearing a little bit about that.
Okay. She asked how we would grade these discussion topics.
So we had a rubric that we used for the discussions, and they earned a certain number of points for each power-up that they used, and then a certain number of points for using the power-up in a comment. So we had it kind of broken up within the rubric. And the guideline for them was it should take at least 2 to 3 sentences to properly address a power-up prompt.
And was it, were you responsive to the quality and the matchup, how well what they posted matched up to the actual power-up? I was imagining after the first couple of weeks if you did that, but was that kind of part of it too, and did that seem to work well?
It wasn't necessarily formalized in the rubric. We would have to provide feedback and kind of an evaluation of their response to kind of model that, but we didn't necessarily build that specifically into the rubric.
One thing I did, however, is each week I would provide individual feedback to each student using SpeedGrader. So not in the discussion form itself, but in SpeedGrader. So each of them got comments from me. So they knew I was looking at it. They knew I was really, should I use a Bloom's verb? I was analyzing their...
Oh, good. Oh, good.
I was analyzing their posts.
That's about mid-level.
Ah, mid-level. Dang it.
Are you willing to share the rubric that you're utilizing for the feedback when you're looking at this for us to kind of look and tweak for our own needs?
Yeah, we have no proprietary on this, so we can share everything we've done. I'll even show you the class or how we've built it and structured it. So.
I think we have time for maybe one power-up share. What did you come up with?
Hashtag best one ever. Hashtag Pilot Baron.
Excellent. Hashtag analyze. Analyze an aviation milestone, event, or record its impact on the current aviation events.
Good.
Very nicely done. I like it. That's a perfect application.
Hashtag perfect. Hashtag thank you for coming, everybody. We appreciate you attending today.
Hashtag thank you.